Hey, what up guys, John from Mongo Fishing. I told you guys last week that I was going to start doing a beginner series type of video, and this is one of them. This is going to be how to rig a swim bait. My most recent video that I just put out was just a bunch of swim baits that I just recently purchased, and so I figured I'd show you several different ways to rig them, because I mean, there are a handful of ways to rig swim baits. I have a few different style swim baits with me, and we'll go from there on how to rig them. We'll start with a jig head. Now, this jig head has a little screw lock built into it. I'm sure you can see that, or a screw keeper, if you will, right? So if it did not have that, and it was just a regular jig head, then it's pretty simple. They're perfect for solid body swim baits. This is a bass crasher. It's a solid body. I think it came in one of the monthly LTB or MTB boxes, but for demonstration purposes, I will use this instead of a Kitech. It's see-through, so I'll use that now. So I'll use this jig head pretending that it does not have that screw lock, and then also show you with the screw lock. So first thing you do is you want to measure your swim bait next to your soft plastic and find out where that swim bait hook goes vertical, or where that jig head hook goes vertical, right? So you got horizontal axis and your vertical axis. So where it goes vertical, that's where it's going to come out. So you kind of want to make that mental note of where that's at. Mark it with your fingers, if you will, or however you want. And then take your jig head hook, go directly through the center of, right through the center of the soft plastic, and you just thread it on. Just run it straight up. Get to that spot about where you think it's supposed to come out at, and you want to come out directly in the center of that also. So you come out and you'd just push it right up. Now that's pretending that it does not have a screw lock. Okay, we know this does have a screw lock, so that's not exactly how you're supposed to use that one. So let me show you how you are supposed to use that one. Now with this, it isn't that bad, but some swim baits, like Kitech, for example, you know, it's got a nice soft rounded nose. If I were using a Kitech in this situation instead of that bass crasher, I trim it nice and flat so that it'll seat up against the jig head nice and flat, right? So just trim off, you know, a 1/4 inch or whatever, just to make it so it has a nice flat tip. Now with this one, I'll show you how we're supposed to use the screw lock. Okay, so we'll take this, we take it, we trim the nose off, right? Here's one that I've already trimmed. So it did the same thing that I was just telling you about with the Kitech, right? See that? Nose is trimmed. Okay, same thing. You gotta measure where the jig head's supposed to come out. I actually had to remove this off here so you can probably see the lines running through there. So this isn't a brand new one, but same thing. You measure it out like we did before. You want to bring it straight out through the center. Okay. Now, these screws, you twist the body, but the tail gets in the way, right? So you bring the tail around the hook. Twist the body, bring the tail around the hook. And as you do this, it is slowly screwing onto your hook. Bam. You can take it up one more time if you wish. But that's how you use those threaded jig heads, is by screwing them on. And if it's thrashed, you know, who cares? You can just rip it off. But if you want to reuse it, then you unscrew it also. Okay? So there's first two ways of rigging. Now that doesn't really work with hollow body swim baits. It works good for solid body swim baits like this. What I mean by hollow body swim baits is stuff like the Yum Money Minnow, for example. Yum Money Minnow, right here in the belly. Could be tough to open sometimes, but the belly opens wide open like that, right? And so if you're using one of those jig heads, it just doesn't have a way of gripping the same. I'm sure you could use it. It's really not designed for this. This style of swim bait isn't your best option if you're using a jig head. Okay, so for this, your best option is either a regular swim bait hook or an EWG. I think there's instructions on the back of this. Okay, so the instructions on the back of this is actually for a weighted swim bait hook like this, right? See that? It's basically an EWG with a chunk of lead on the bottom. So what they want you to do here is you go in dead center through the nose, and you come back out just, you know, 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch down like that. You see that? Now, you don't want to run this all the way through, because if you do, it's just going to tear the rubber and you're going to have a mess on your hands. This isn't going to last very long. So you did that. Now we're going to pull the hook back out, and we're going to take our swim bait head and run it through just like that. Okay? Now you take your belly, spread it back open again. Easier said than done because I'm talking to a camera. Spread it back open again. Find where your hook, you kind of just, you know, bend the body up like this, find where the hook wants to come out, and run it through. Now you want to make sure you come out dead center on top again, so this may take a few times of sticking, so you don't want to bury it all the way through yet until you know that you're lined up right. So it comes out like that. Now you can just pull forward, pull back, and there you go. Your hook, nice and smooth. You didn't damage the head by pulling this weight all the way through it. Okay? Instead, you are good to go. Now you tie it onto your line. Okay? So that's that style. Alright, next is you're fishing a plastic worm, and you decide that you want to do a swim bait, and it's basically the same thing as a plastic worm. You're just Texas rigging. You're rigging it the same way you would there, except for with your EWG. Now, hook size depends on what size swim bait you want. I normally use 4s. I just grabbed a 5 here. Let me see if I have any 4s. Alright, I got a thin wire 4th. So your hook is on, you've been bass fishing. Normally if I were to rig this up just for swim bait and I wanted to use an egg sinker, maybe I don't have any weighted swim bait hooks with me or something like that, then I would peg the sinker in place. But just because it's demonstration purposes right now, I'm not going to peg it. I have the how to peg a hook on other videos. Okay, so this works great with stuff like These little reaction innovation skinny dipper, or in this case it's what, a little dipper? Yeah, little dipper. It'll be the same way you did the other one, kind of very, very similar to what you just did with that last one, right? Directly through the nose, centered. Come out 1/4 inch down or so, also centered. Run this up, and again, this is the same as Texas rigging, right? We briefly discussed Texas rigging on the Woo Tungsten video. Again, you want to see where the hook comes out, where the hook wants to come out, right when it's lined up like this. So it's about where it goes vertical, so way back here. Okay, so we'll kind of make that little mark. In this one, it just happens to line up with where the back of that gap stops. That's where it lines up on this little dipper with this 4/0. Now, not all 4/0s are the same either, though. So your 4/0 may be different than my 4/0 lengthwise. You have to check that too. Same thing as we did with that last one. With this, on this little dipper and the skinny dipper, they have a little groove that sits back here in the back. Right? The hook sits right there in that groove, but you still push forward, pull back. Now it's exposed. It is totally weedless. And if your weight is pegged in place, you're good to go. You're ready to rock and roll. If it's not pegged in place, well, it's going to separate. Okay? So that is that. That's what, 1, 2, 3. This is the 4th way. So one last way. And this is probably my favorite way. But again, not all swim baits are created equal. So they're not all usable this way. And that is with a keel weighted swim bait hook with underspin and a nose screw lock, like that. This is my favorite way. Now, I like this way because you get the extra added flash. You basically have a very similar swim and appearance as you would with that style, except for now you've got the additional flash of an underspin. So for this one, you can use pretty much any swim bait you want for the most part. Trying to think one off the top of my head that you can't do it on. Off the top of my head, I'm not thinking of any. So we'll use this same little dipper. In this case, this hook is probably too long for it now, but I think this is a 3/0, but I've got 4s and 5s also. So what you want to do is you want to screw the screw lock directly into the nose of your soft plastic. Okay, now some screw locks have a point like that that's straight on. Some, the point is a little bit off to the side, but what you're trying to do is get this centered. You screw it on. You don't necessarily want to go all the way up to the top, but you can. You just want to make sure that it's not upside down or canted off to the side or anything like that. So you have a little bit of room either going forward or backwards to get it so that it lines up nice and straight. And then it's the same way you would do previously with the Texas rig that we talked about, and that's just lining it up, figuring out where your spot is. Again, with this one, this time it's actually sitting a little further back than it did last time. Poke it through, make sure it comes out centered on top. There we go. And you're ready to rock and roll. Okay. Now, one little tip that I didn't mention when I covered the jig heads, especially the ones that don't have a screw lock, and that's keeping the head in place. So people like to use a drop of super glue right there to keep your head attached to the front of your swim bait. Right, so they're super glued together. Regular super glue works fine. It's super thin. You run a higher risk of gluing yourself to your swim bait or to your swim bait head or whatever. If you buy super glue gel, it's a little thicker consistency. It's not nearly as runny, right? So it still does the same thing. And believe it or not, super glue cures underwater. You don't need to glue it and then wait for a while or whatever. You can glue it, get it in place, put your drop of glue there, and then dip it in the water, and it'll cure underwater. It's fine. That's it, guys. That is 5 ways of doing it. Regular jig head, screw-lock jig head, the regular keel-weighted swim bait hook, where you poke through and then run it that way instead of running the whole way Texas rig. Texas rig with a pegged bullet sinker on top. I just didn't peg it. Keel-weighted underspin, which is, like I said, probably my favorite way to throw a swim bait. So, yeah, that's it, guys. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It's right down there. Looks like me holding a fish. Could be right over here. Looks like me holding a fish. Drop a comment below. Give it a thumbs up if you enjoyed this video, if you learned anything. Guys, with that said, get out of the water, be safe, and go stick some lips.